All right, today we are looking at the 2008 FRQ question number 1. This is one of the longer questions, and it's one of the more typical type questions that you see on an FRQ AP Macro exam. It starts off with, assume that the United States economy is operating at full employment output and the government has a balanced budget. A drop in consumer confidence reduces consumption spending, causing the economy to enter into a recession. So we have the setting for this question. That's usually how these longer ones start off. Using a correctly labeled graph of the short-run Phillips curve, show the effect of the decrease in consumption spending, label the initial position A and the new position B. So I'm going to start off not with the Phillips curve, but with an ASAD curve. Now, you don't have to draw this one. It's not part of the answer, but I need some guidance in what I'm doing. So I like to start off with the models. The models make everything easier. So we know we're at full employment, so real GDP is at potential GDP. Now I'm going to illustrate the Phillips curve. So we have our downward sloping short run Phillips curve. I've included the long run in it as well. The answer doesn't require that, but it's nice to have it there. So I've got our point A. Point A is full employment, so we got to make sure we add that. Now we're going to show the impact of the cut in consumer spending, all right, the loss of consumer confidence. So we're going to see a shift in aggregate demand to the left, dropping price level and dropping real output, which in turn is going to increase unemployment. Give us that cyclical unemployment there. So we need to show the new position B and the change that it actually takes place. So we see that price level has dropped, so inflation is going to go down, and that we see that real GDP has decreased, which means that unemployment is going to go up. So we need to illustrate point B at a point of higher unemployment and lower inflation. So moving from point A to point B, it always helps to add an arrows or some arrows with it, just to show the effect, to illustrate the change. You know, the labels are enough, but the arrows help just a little bit more. If you have a reader that's looking at it and can't figure out what you're doing, that kind of gives them the full answer that this is what you intended. So always include the arrows if it's showing the effect or showing the change. All right, the second part. What is the impact of the recession on the federal budget? Explain. Now, this was kind of set up earlier on because they stated that we have a balanced budget. A balanced budget means that our inputs or our tax revenues are the same as our government spending, so where everything's balanced. In this case, we are going into a recession. So what is the impact of the recession on the federal budget? Explain. So we're going to go into a deficit. And there's three different ways that we can explain this one. The first is that a drop in GDP will drop national income. All right, real output and real income kind of match up to one another. National output and national income. So when one goes down, the other is going to go down. So if national income goes down, that's going to be a decrease in tax revenues as well. All right, which means that their income isn't as high, so they're going to be spending more than they're taking in and going to cause a deficit. You also could say that there's going to be an increase in transfer payments. You know, unemployment's all of a sudden going to go up. They're going to be paying out more, and because tax revenues are either going down or not changing, it means they're going to go into a deficit. Or simply in response to this recession, they're going to be spending more to get us out of it, and they're going to go into a deficit as well. Any way you explain this is fine, but I would say tax revenues or transfer payments probably the better options in this one. All right. Part C, assume that the current real gross domestic product falls short of full employment output by $500 billion and the marginal propensity to consume is 0.8. All right, so they set it up. Now they want us to calculate the max or minimum increase in government spending that could bring about full employment. So how much do they actually have to spend, taking the MPC into consideration, to get us out of this $500 billion recessionary gap? All right. So we know that the spending multiplier is 1 over the MPS. Our MPC is 0.8. So to get our MPS, we take 1 minus our MPC, we get our MPS of 0.2. That means 1 over 0.2 or 5 is our multiplier. So we know that every dollar spent by the federal government is going to get multiplied by 5. So $1 turns into $5. So how much do we need to spend to get rid of our $500 billion gap? So if we took the $500 billion divided by the multiplier, we're going to end up with the $100 billion that we need to spend. So it does say calculate on this one too, so you want to make sure you throw the math in there that you did to get this number. All right, second part says assume that instead of increasing government spending, the government decides to reduce personal Income taxes. Will the reduction in personal income taxes required to achieve full employment be larger than, smaller than the government spending change you calculated in Part C? Explain why. Now that's a mouthful right there, but make sure you read through those carefully, because this one's asking what's going to be bigger. Is the tax cut, is it going to need to be bigger than the spending increase or smaller than the spending increase? In this case, the reduction in personal income taxes will need to be larger than the spending from C. Now, so that's part one. We always know that the tax multiplier is smaller than the spending multiplier, so you got to spend less than you need to cut in taxes to get the same result. So you need to put that into words for the explanation as well. So you could say that consumers will not spend the entire amount saved in the tax reduction. That's basically saying that I get a tax cut. I'm not going to spend the whole thing. Some of it's going towards savings. In this case, 20%, 0.2 is going towards savings. So we're going to initially put some away, not spend it all. When the government spends money, all of that gets added into GDP. So you could go with that reasoning, or you could simply say that the tax multiplier is smaller, one less, than the spending multiplier. That would suffice for an answer as well. All right, moving forward, using a correctly labeled graph of the loanable funds market, show the impact of the increased government spending on the real interest rate in the economy. So you have to put your loanable funds market out there. Typical supply and demand curve, you could add that demand of loanable funds, the DLF there. But the key part of this curve is you want to make sure you have real interest rates on the vertical axis. That's one of the key points that they're going to be looking for. So we've got this. We have to show the impact of the government spending. Now we went from a balanced budget to deficit spending. So the way we get that money is by borrowing it. So in this case, demand for loanable funds, because the government needs more loanable funds to spend, demand for loanable funds goes up. Now this is going to have a result of an increase in the real interest rate. So quantity of loanable funds goes up, but the real interest rate increases. Now that's going to come into the second question. How will the real interest rate change in Part D affect the growth rate of the United States economy? Explain. So this is a crowding out incident here. One of the things they love throwing into these longer questions, what is this going to do to economic growth? So the higher real interest rates are going to discourage investment spending. All right, specifically investment spending in this case. Will it hurt consumer spending? Yes. But investment spending is key towards economic growth. So that decrease in investment spending due to the higher interest rates is going to decrease purchases in capital goods, or it's going to decrease capital formation, which will not necessarily, bring back potential GDP, but it's going to slow the growth of potential GDP. It's going to slow the growth of the economy. So make sure you're using slow instead of decreasing growth. We're not decreasing growth. We're just slowing it. We're reducing the rate at which we are growing. All right, so that sums it up for this FRQ here. Hopefully you got something from that. Make sure that you take a look at the other FRQ walkthroughs that I've done. I got a variety of different years on there. And remember, all these questions can be found on the AP College Board website, so you can use these to practice. So thanks for watching, guys. Take care and see you next time.